Hello, I'm Natalie MacDonald and you're joining us in the Dukascopy TV studios for part 2 of an interview on austerity with Dr. Frank Hollenbeck. Dr. Frank, thank you very much for coming back in. So, with European growth slowing and depression in countries such as Greece and Spain, European leaders are calling for more growth-orientated policies. Some economists have suggested that governments should increase spending until the governments reach escape velocity and then deal with the deficit problem. What's your take on this?
To understand government spending, you need to understand the concept of the multiplier. Okay, and the multiplier is, suppose the government comes in and spends $1,000 at Walmart. Okay, Walmart's inventories will drop by $1,000, so it will order $1,000 worth of inventory, which will turn out to be $1,000 worth of income to someone who will maybe spend 60% of it at Walmart. So in other words, $600 will see Walmart's inventory drop another $600, which will induce Walmart again to order more inventory and so on and so on. Okay, so that in this particular example where we had the marginal propensity to consume be 60%, a $1,000 increase in government spending led to a $2,500 increase in income and GDP, as we can see from this standard Keynesian graph. Okay. Now you're going to say, well, how did the government finance that $1,000? Well, okay, suppose that it taxed $1,000. Okay. So in other words, what would happen is that it would spend $1,000 at Walmart, and because it taxed $1,000, people would reduce their consumption of Walmart by $600. So we'd have a reduction in inventories of $400 times a multiplier of 2.5, and we'd have the government increasing spending by 1,000 would lead to an increase in income and GDP of 1,000. This is known as the balanced budget multiplier, and basically says that $1 of government spending that is financed by $1 of taxes will lead to $1 increase in income or GDP. However, in this example, there's an implicit assumption. And the implicit assumption is that the $400, okay, that was taxed was actually held in hoarding, in the sense that when the government increases taxes by 1,000, it reduced consumption by $600, but it also reduced hoarding by $400. And what I mean by hoarding is stuffing your money in a mattress. In other words, it's a claim on goods and services that no one is using. If instead that $400 had been savings, and savings is basically giving those goods and services to somebody else, okay, and that somebody else is businesses who are going to use that $400 to buy plant and equipment, then a $1,000 increase in government spending will crowd out, this is known as a crowding out effect, will crowd out exactly $1,000 of private consumption and investment spending. Okay, so that government spending doesn't have any impact on either incomes or GDP. And this is something even Keynesians don't quite recognize, is that a lot of Keynes' work was basically based on this concept of hoarding. In other words, his entire structure is based on the idea of hoarding. You have to realize is that classical economists never considered hoarding to be very important. They considered it to be at most 5%. However, even if hoarding is important, even if you believe hoarding is important in an economy, if output prices adjust, there is no role for the government. Let me give you an example I've used a lot, which is the $10 10 apple example where the price of the apple is $1. Suppose that people increase their hoarding by $5. Then output prices will drop from $1 to 50 cents. In other words, we have $5 chasing 10 apples. And when the government comes in and spends $5, it's not really replacing the $5 that were hoarded. What happens is that when it spends the $5, it will cause prices to go back up from 50 cents to $1, and it's actually displaced the purchasing power of the dollars that were already being spent. So again, we have a situation where the government spending is basically crowding out private spending. Okay, so in other words, the only time we have a role for the government to substitute for private spending is when we have hoarding changing. okay? And output prices haven't adjusted yet. Okay, and I talked about this in the interview I did on deflation, but I explained there that it actually may be a situation where the medicine may be worse than the disease, and that the government, by printing money, is causing a reallocation of resources and a change in relative prices, which is probably not desirable. Okay, so the real solution is to avoid this changing and hoarding, and to do that we need to eliminate the fractional reserve banking system and implement the Chicago plan. That would be the solution.
The European Commission has given France more time to reach its 3% target, and Italy has recently considered reducing some key tax rates. This is all part of a general desire to slow down austerity programs to give countries more time to make the necessary structural adjustments. But how likely is this to actually work?
Well, I keep calling it the myth of austerity. Suppose that you have a friend who spent 12% more than he makes in income in 2008, has spent 31% more than he makes in 2009, has spent 24% more than he makes in 2010, and has spent 26% more than he makes in 2011. Would you say that he's being austere?
No.
Okay. Well, I just described Spain. Okay. And if you look at these, this graph of French spending, we can see that every single year since 2008, French spending has increased. It's actually increased an average of 2.3%. That's not exactly what I would call austerity. Now, in the case of Italy, okay, it's been trying to get its deficit target down to 3%. But I don't know what's so magical about 3%. If we look at the growth rate of Italy since 1980, it's basically been almost 0%. Okay, so if you're running a 3% deficit, okay, and have a growth of 0%, it's just slow death. And we already have Italy at a 130% debt to GDP ratio. What it should be doing to get down to 60% debt to GDP ratio is be running very, very large budget surpluses, which means that it needs to significantly cut government spending. But that's highly unlikely to occur in the future. So, like I said before, is that I'm quite pessimistic about the future.
Frank, thank you for your insight into a key topic at present.
Yes.
We've got more exclusive interviews for you coming up, so don't go away.